Hello aspirants, looking at editorials in question bank for 6th December. The first editorial in the Hindu newspaper is The Heart of the Problem. So this is regarding the Heart of Asia meet which took place presently in Amritsar. So this is the 14 nation grouping which has its meets annually since 2011. So it's called Heart of Asia, the Istanbul process, because it was initiated in Istanbul, capital of Turkey, not the capital. Capital is Ankara. But yes, so this Heart of Asia conference, the purpose of this is to discuss Afghanistan and its neighborhood, the problems which are prominent here: counter terrorism, counter narcotics, security, economic development related issues. So these regional problems will be discussed here. So this is the conference. Last year in 2015 it was held in Islamabad in Pakistan. In 2016 it has been held in Amritsar in India. So in this Heart of Asia conference, what has taken place we have already discussed in news. So the same points are put forth in this editorial again. So we'll discuss that. But when you do news thoroughly, editorials and other articles also become quite easy. So that is also important. So what it says is regarding the statement made by President of Afghanistan, Mr. Ashraf Ghani. So he spoke strongly against Pakistan, which is harboring terrorism, when Pakistan offered it $5 million line of credit as developmental assistance. The Afghan president clearly outrightly refused it and said rather Pakistan should use this money to end terrorism on its soil, because once terrorism ends, only then we can bring in peace and development for the people. So developmental assistance with terrorism continuing is of no sense. So such strong words and statements were used. So the thing is that Afghanistan also suffers on the same count due to Pakistan as we see in India. There is this Haqqani network, a terrorist organization prominent in Afghanistan, which takes shelter in Pakistan. So Pakistan, Afghanistan are neighbors. So they cross over the border and get into Pakistan, and Pakistan government has not done enough to tackle this terror group. So this is what Afghanistan demands. So now in this Amritsar declaration which came out after this summit meeting was talking about terrorism related issues only. It pointed out various terrorist organizations which are making the region suffer. Also there are some terrorist organizations like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan which targets Pakistan. So Pakistan is also a target for terrorist attacks. So then there is selective targeting of terrorism by Pakistan too, which is not liked. So these points were highlighted. The second part of the editorial talks about how India and Pakistan would go ahead to. So India is presently on a standoff with Pakistan, and going ahead requires the country to engage sensibly with other nations, because India and Afghanistan both criticize Pakistan at this summit and we have distanced ourselves from Pakistan. But then when we do this, what happens is Pakistan goes closer to China and Russia. So we have already seen that China and Russia are coming closer. China is already a very close ally of Pakistan. We have seen in the case of Maulana Masood Azhar being declared as a terrorist at UN, which China is stalling as a permanent member, UN Security Council member. So this issue, so we see China on various counts supports Pakistan, and Russia also had its joint exercise conducted with Pakistan just few days after the Uri attacks. Even in this present summit, Russian representative said that this is not the platform to criticize Pakistan. So he also indirectly spoke for Pakistan. So these things, developments which are taking place on the international fora have to be taken into consideration. So this we should avoid, that Pakistan goes closer to these other important powers in the region. Another point is about Afghanistan too. So with Afghanistan, Pakistan does not give a transit route. So Afghanistan is a neighbor of Pakistan. You can look at the map too. This is the map of Heart of Asia nations, the 14 nations. So here is India, then comes Pakistan, and then here is Afghanistan. So Afghanistan-India border is there on map. It's a very small border, but it's actually border with POK. So POK is no longer under us. So we don't have a direct land route to Afghanistan. So what we are developing is the Chabahar port in Iran. So this will also give us transit route and sea route to Afghanistan. We are also planning to have a cargo link, air cargo link also. Presently an agreement has been finalized. So all these aspects are fine, the editorial says, but then Afghanistan has better access to China. The routes are here developed. Even Afghanistan and China have a very small border. So, but there is a border, land border between the two. So this roadways here are well developed. So land routes are well developed here. So Afghanistan may use this, or other countries. It's well connected to Iran. So these other countries would be the ones which Afghanistan would depend on, and not India. So India has to work together on a pace should be hastened, so that Afghanistan also does not fall away from India in terms of cooperation. So these are other points which are put forth, because Chabahar port is still under construction. So these are the aspects highlighted. Then the next editorial in the Hindu newspaper is the politics of exaggeration. So this is a political article. This is regarding West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee and the hue and cry which she makes regarding army's presence in Kolkata, regarding her flight being delayed, regarding other such small issues which are all politically motivated. So I have avoided all such articles which come up as front page articles in the Hindu too. So we don't need to get into all this. Even this editorial is speaking the same thing, that these are spoken of because she sees herself now as an alternative leader at the national fora, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi has no opposition presently, de facto as such. So she sees herself rising at the national platform now. So she's making some initiatives in that direction. It was also seen that she took such steps even when the left parties were in power in West Bengal. So there's nothing important in this article for us. You can just skip it. The next editorial, other two editorials I've picked up are from Indian Express newspaper. This editorial, Case for Consensus. This is regarding the GST Council and its meeting when the finance minister who chairs the GST Council, Mr. Arun Jaitley, has said that we want consensus. Consensus means all people should agree. All the members, all states should agree with the decisions. It should not be by a voting, a majority, but consensus. So that is what they are trying to achieve. What are the problems we should see? The present GST Council meet also proved inconclusive because some states now want dual control, means control or sharing over the administrative powers to oversee the new taxation regime, the GST taxation system. So this is what they are demanding from center, that they should also have control. Plus, some of the states are demanding that there should be discussion on demonetization as well. Some are, of course, of the viewpoint that GST and demonetization are not linked, but the editorial argues that because of demonetization, states have suffered because there is a general economic slowdown and they have resulted in their revenue losses as well. So this is a concern. Of course, the GST, once implemented, will compensate for any losses, revenue losses for the states. So that is inbuilt in the GST bill too. So these revenue concerns of the state are addressed because even the base year for determining this is 2015-16 and the compensation will be assuming 14% growth rate of the revenue. So revenue is growing by 14% rate is the assumption which will be brought in from next year onwards once it is implemented. So this provision is also already there. So compensation will be coming forward for the states. So there are various viewpoints which need to be taken into consideration and consensus needs to be built on issues before the GST Council's decisions are finalized, and then they will become part of the bill and that has to be passed by the Lok Sabha. So until and unless that is not done, GST cannot become effective from the deadline which the center has set for itself, 1st April 2017. So we'll have to see how it works out. So the key issues which the GST Council is discussing and has finalized on many, even on some cases it finalized and then backtracked in the next GST Council meeting. So such things have also cropped it. So these are the key issues. One is on threshold. Threshold basically means at what amount will GST become effective, means on whom will GST be effective. So that is if you have an annual turnover of 20 lakh. So then GST is applicable on that entity, on that company or whatever. So this is the annual turnover limit. Of course, for other states like hilly states and northeastern states, it's low at 10 lakh per annum. So this is the threshold which was decided by GST Council. Then control. So annual turnover up to 1.5 crores, control will be with the states, and over 1.5 crore will be with the center. So this was also decided. Then compensation. So compensation is to the states, because once GST is put into effect, there are chances that states may suffer in the amount of revenue which they receive. So this should be compensated by the states. Of course, this will be only during the transition phase. Then the states are bound to benefit from GST's implementation. So till that time, till 5 years compensation would be provided to the states. That has been decided. So this base year for this, as we just saw, is 2015-16. Then exemption list is a list of commodities which would be exempted from GST, which will not be charged. Any tax would not be charged on them. So these essential goods, they are called zero rated goods. So this is the exemption list which should be finalized by GST Council. And revenue neutral rates and tax slabs. So every commodity has to be taxed at a particular rate. So these rates should be such that they remain revenue neutral. So revenue neutral means the rate at which it is taxed right now, under the GST2, the taxation rate should be on the same level. So that will make it revenue neutral. So revenue neutral tax rates and tax slabs. So that's why there will be different tax rates for different commodities. So this tax slabs will be decided. So that also, as I said, once decided, in the next meeting they modified it too. So this was the final tax rate which has been decided till date by GST Council. So some commodities, basic commodities like food grains, are zero rated. 5% are some other mass consumption commodities, 12%, 18%, 28%, and finally the ultra luxury goods, luxury cars, and all these sin goods, as they are called, goods which are not good for the society, for the individual's health, are called sin goods, SIN, sin goods. They will be charged at the maximum taxation rate, 28%, plus a cess will also be imposed on them. So white goods, again we know white goods are commodities, electronic commodities like refrigerators, washing machines, which are generally white in color. So they are called white goods. So this is the GST Council's tax rates decided. So we'll have to see, again a GST Council meeting will be held. So more decisions will come forth. We'll keep hearing about that. Then the next editorial in the Hindu newspaper is the churn in Europe. This is regarding the referendum in Italy and the constitutional amendments which were put to referendum. The results have come out and people have voted against these constitutional amendments. As a result, even the Prime Minister of Italy has declared that he would quit. So these are the developments. Also, the no campaign for these referendum was also led by anti-EU right-wing political parties. So in political ideology, there is a complete spectrum from left to right. So left ideology is communist, socialist ideology. Right ideology is conservative leaders, pro-market leaders, and centrist are balancing the two. So this is the whole ideology. We are seeing presently right-wing leaders coming to the fore. Even in Austria, the runoff to the president's elections saw even a far-right leader in fray, but he did not win. So this is also a development which has taken place. Donald Trump has been elected as the president of USA. Even UK exit from EU, that was on the sentiments of anti-globalization, anti-immigration, conservative ideology. So this is seen throughout. So this is also taken as a development in the same direction, which is threatening the existence of organizations like EU. Then next we look at the question bank. We have selected one question for the question bank. This is based on an article in Hindu. So this is, who are environmental refugees? How far does UN Refugee Convention of 1951 uphold their rights? Are the provisions in the recent Paris Agreement on climate change, on climate migration, a step in the right direction? Discuss. So first of all, who are environmental refugees? So environmental refugees are people who are forced to migrate because of droughts, famines, rising sea levels, and other natural disasters caused due to climate change. So these environmental refugees are rising throughout. We are seeing that around 24 million people have been displaced every year since 2008. So this is a huge figure. So now second question is, how far does UN Refugee Convention of 1951 upholds their rights? So actually it does not. The UN Refugee Convention of 1951 only recognizes refugees based on those who are fleeing persecution because of race, religion, nationality, affiliation to a particular social group or political opinion. So there is no environmental refugee provision or people migrating because of climate change part of this convention. So this is one problem. Even in 2015 September, we saw in New Zealand a man was refused asylum. He lost the court case. New Zealand Supreme Court rejected his argument in which he claimed that he is suffering from environmental problems in his country, that is Kiribati. So Kiribati is a Pacific group of islands country. So there are storm surges, flooding, water contamination. So on those basis he was migrating, but he was refused asylum in New Zealand. So these incidents show that there is a need for at least the UN Refugee Convention to be amended to include climate refugees, or a separate complete convention be brought in to address the issues which environmental refugees face. Then next part of the question was on Paris Agreement on climate change. The provisions under it, are they steps in the right direction? So Paris Agreement on climate change in its discussion had held very high viewpoints, but then eventually the final draft which came forth and was passed does not completely include all the provisions. So it's a letdown. So Paris Agreement in its paragraph 50 of the loss and damage section says that a task force will be created to work and develop recommendations for addressing climate migration. So people who migrate due to climate change, how to address this issue will be recommended upon. So this task force now has no authority. It's only going to give recommendations. There is no detailing of functions, operations and funding for this authority. So there is no much power, nothing much done. It's only a recommendatory kind of body committee being set up. So it's a letdown. The provisions under the draft of the Paris Agreement had provided for climate change displacement coordination facility. So this was a facility proposed to arrange for compensation for the displaced people, to provide for emergency relief, to plan a relocation of these displaced climate change displaced population. So this facility has not actually come into effect. So there may be a reconsideration on this decision and this may be incorporated. The other provision which needs to be there is that there should be a separate international treaty on environmental refugees, so that the obligations of the nation states to accommodate this population in their territories is made. So this is there. If or another simpler way is even the UN Refugee Convention can be modified to include climate migration under it. So these are the points. Also, climate change has to be taken in seriously. The nationally determined contributions which countries have proposed before the Paris Agreement, under this Paris Agreement, have to be adhered to. Otherwise, climate change will result in environmental refugees increasing. Now, this is not good for countries. Even the three largest emitters, India, USA and China, these are three largest greenhouse gas emitters, will be the major sufferers because of climate change, and many people will be dislocated in these regions, in these countries themselves. So this is the map to the UN climate change refugee map. The reasons why various regions will see displacement. So some are delta regions where there may be displacement. Small islands, there are many islands which may even submerge and disappear completely. Then coastlines are under threat. Then areas exposed to desertification and drought, they are shown in yellow regions. Then areas exposed to hurricanes, which are shown in purple. And Arctic areas vulnerable to ice and melting of the permafrost, these are the green regions. So all these regions will see climate change and refugees due to this climate change. So this is there. Then this is regarding the Pacific Islands too. The person who was seeking refugee status in New Zealand, which is here, below Australia here, Kiribati, this is the nation to which he belongs. So these are various island nations, group of islands which are specific nations in the Pacific Ocean. And finally, this is the impacts of climate change. So how climate change would affect various countries across the globe. This is adjusted to the resilience capacity of various nations. So how far they can respond to it. So countries which are least resilient are having the major risk. So this is the overall vulnerability shown. The darker, more the vulnerability. So you can see African and Asian nations would be majorly affected. And this is regarding environmental refugees, the numbers increasing as we see from the past to present to the future. So That is a huge economic cost to average loss to the economy as well because of climate change and displacement. So that is it for today. Thank you.